So first we will discuss this be the verse. Um, if anyone does not have the text, then they can tell me, and then I will share the screen. But if all of you have the texts with you, then I don't see any reason to share the text. Okay.
না স্যার
So
টেক্সট আছে, অসুবিধা নেই।
okay, fine. So I'll just so as you know that Philip Larkin is a movement poet, um, and all of you know what the movement is, the movement with the uh, caps M. Can someone enlighten me about what the movement is in English poetry? M with a capital M, movement. Anyone? Shraman?
So actually, I'm not feeling well today. So
Okay.
I will
So,
just I will just listen.
all right. Okay. Um, so, movement poetry or the movement was a way of writing poems by the poets writing after the Second World War. So, the term movement was coined by um, J.D. Scott uh, in the magazine Spectator. Of course, Spectator is not the Spectator of the neoclassical times, but this was another Spectator. So in that magazine, uh, this term, the movement poets or the movement, they were it was coined by J.D. Scott. Now, the movement, according to the poets themselves, or J.D. Scott, who described the kind of poetry or the kind of poems the movement poets used to write, including Kingsley Amis, um, then Philip Larkin himself, um, and Tom Gunn, many of the poets you have in your syllabus. You have these poets and their poems in the syllabus. And movement poetry was a rejection of the ideas or the values that modern poetry um, believed in, or modern poetry, uh, M with the capital M, uh, recommended. Movement poetry was against the overtly experimental words that were supposed to be used in poetry in order to make it, as Shipra ma'am had exemplified in the class earlier, in earlier classes, that due to the experiment with these words, due to the experiment with language, or too much experiment with language and words, modern poetry had become difficult to be read by the common people. It receded into a niche of intellectuals and students of literature and academicians. Movement poetry was aimed to bring it back from that niche and to mainstream it once more. I don't know how successful the movement poets had become, but movement poets themselves uh, belonged to the larger category of modern poems or modern poetry, and Philip Larkin is considered to be one of the most illustrious of the movement poets. Unlike Eliot, who said that poetry should be an escape from emotion, and anybody who knows emotions would know what it is to escape from the emotion and to register the same in form of words, as opposed to T.S. Eliot's dictum of poetry, definition of poetry. The movement poets were more feeling oriented, emotion oriented. They wanted to focus on the naked realities after the Second World War, not in the abstract mythical terms in which T.S. Eliot was churning his poetry in the 1920s, but they wanted to look at the realities in the aftermath of the Second World War in realistic terms, as they are. While they say that movement poetry is about emotions, movement poetry is about feelings, yet movement poets themselves did not really respond emotionally to the harsh realities that have come up after the Second World War, but they just presented it as they are, though seen from the angle of feelings or emotions, not just objectively. But there should be a balance. According to them, there should be a balance between what they feel and what they see. Seeing, watching, observing will well up some emotions, and these emotions will be the markers of the reality that they observe outside the ivory tower, as it has been derogatorily called, the ivory tower of the intelligentsia of the modern poets. They avoided movement poetry. Movement poets avoided figurative language. They used colloquial diction. In fact, they uh, followed, they started to write in rhymes as well, and in iambic lines. I am sure that you know what iambic lines are. You know, in your prosody you have studied iambic poetry, iambic tetrameter, pentameter, and things like that. So among the movement poets, Larkin was a pessimist of sorts, and according to some critic, I have not been able to locate which critic said this. According to that critic, Philip Larkin, quote unquote, and I quote, the saddest heart in the post-war supermarket. The saddest heart in the post-war supermarket, which indicates towards the kind of pessimism that we can find in his poetry. Uh, Pessimism, of course, is a result of the harsh realities of the scarcities of the destruction in the wake of the Second World War. Okay, and this, as I said, I think I skipped it. This term, the movement, was coined in 1954. So this is definitely post-war, post Second World War. So we will try to understand Larkin's poems. We will try to understand the present two poems that we have today in the light of these information. Okay, so let's see if the first poem is confirms to um, whatever we discussed in the first 10 minutes or so. This be the verse. It was published in the volume called Collected Poems. And the one that is there on the internet is from 2001. The volume Collected Poems seems to be from 2001, but I guess Philip Larkin published the volume much earlier than that, maybe 50 years ago or more. So this be the verse by Philip Larkin. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. Do not keep this meeting on a loud mode. If you are listening it on a cellular device, if there is an option of it going loudspeaker mode, then don't do it, because your parents might not find it very funny. So they fuck you up, your mom and dad. So your mom and dad, our moms and dads, our mothers and fathers, they fuck us up. See how plainly Larkin states it. Something that we believe, something that we think about, something that we discuss with our friends and peers is being stated by Larkin, a canonical poet, in very simple terms. And I said colloquial words. Fuck is a colloquial word. So they fuck you up. They mess with you. They do things. They mess your psyche. They mess your psychology. They insert certain constructions in your brain with which you live for the rest of your life, either under the burden of guilt or either under the burden of failed ambitions, because the parents often think their children to be their clones, and their children are supposed to do what they have failed to do, especially Asian parents, if not English or American parents. But things are changing, of course, and our parents, especially in case of ladies, it's their dads, it's their fathers who support them, and in case of boys, if we get any kind of support, it's usually from our mothers. Fathers are usually not very happy with the decisions that we often make, and mothers aren't happy with the decisions their daughters make. Of course, we know about Oedipus complex, we know about reverse Oedipus complex, we know about Electra complex, and all these complexes, psychological complexes, can be read in these lines, that the word fuck can be understood to be a sexual word also, and it can relate to the marriage of Oedipus with um, his mother, and of course, but the dad portion will be a little will be debatable. But even in this case, Oedipus was abandoned by uh, his father. So in a way, his father did fuck him up. So this fucking up is generational. There's this short reel video on Facebook that a man, a guy asks his mother that did your mother also beat you up like this? And the mother says yes. And then the guy says that uh, until what time will this insanity run in the family? And then he is slapped. So fucking up is generational. It's not just your parents who have done things to you or said things to you that has made you feel guilty or have made you feel miserable, but it's not their words, it's the words of their parents and then their parents. But somewhere it stops. Maybe when you will become parents, you might stop this cycle of making your children feel guilty of things that they could not achieve. Anyway, however, the intention of the parents is never to fuck you. They do it unintentionally. They don't mean harm to you. They don't mean bad. They don't mean any. The only two people in the world who would never want you to have a bad time or take a wrong decision or happen or they won't want something to happen to you will be your parents, your mother and your father. These are the only two people who will never want you to end up badly. Or maybe if you are too much of a devil of a offspring, then maybe they want you dead or something. But that's the usual thing. That's what how we glorify our parents. So you won't read this poem in front of your parents because we glorify our parents. We post on Facebook that how the mother is cooking for us even in the 40-degree plus temperatures in front of the gas, and the father is working hard outside in the sun to help us to feed us. Philip Larkin perhaps had these issues like we all have with our parents, and seen from the biblical angle. Adam and Eve were the children of God, and they too were indisciplined. They too did not obey their parent, and then they were thrown off the paradise. And from then onwards, all these problems happened. We became mortal, and so on and so forth. And in the similar vein, Satan too was a child of God because God has given birth to everything. And he too was truant. He too did not fear God, at least not in the beginning. And then he fought with God, and then he was kicked out of the house. They will fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. As I said earlier, our parents and we, when we become parents, will fill our offsprings with our faults, because some faults run in our DNA. For example, I am short tempered, and my father too was short tempered. But now I find my mother short tempered too. So I don't know from which side I inherited this short temperedness. I am not good in maths, but my father was good in maths because he was a engineer. But my mother was not good in maths. So I guess I inherited all the negative things from both my parents. Yeah. So uh, uh, again, to explain it in my language, no, I mean, in class 10 you need to get passing marks. If you had got 0 in 10, you would never pass. Anyway, so what was I saying? Um, and they just add some extra just for you. So we take after our parents, not just DNA wise, but behavior wise as well. We mimic not just the language, but the behavior of our parents. We mimic their faults as well, sometimes strengths, but usually it's the faults that we take up. For example, as children, we had learned obscene words first, like shala or other bad words, not the good words. I don't know what good words there are in this bad world, but you know, children are often very much interested in what is hidden from them. So their parents will not mouth these kinds of words in front of the children unless uh, the parents are from a so-called uneducated background. Anyway, so we take all the faults from our parents, and then they add something to our faults as well. So there was this stand-up comedian, and he said that his mother's side was rich and dark, and his father's side was fair and poor. Now he is poor and dark. So I think, yeah, my father was also very fair, and both my parents, like both their ancestors, were like poor as shit. So that's okay. But I guess I also inherited these faulty genes from my parents and added some fault of my own. So is he Shai Kiranto? Yes, yes, yes. That bloke. Yes, he's very funny. So is this is Larkin talking about determinism? I think he is, because if you read about Philip Larkin, which I did last night to show off, if you read Philip Larkin really, then you would know that he was much influenced by Thomas Hardy. I did not know that till last night. Anyway, so Thomas Hardy was a renowned pessimist, and thus Philip Larkin is also a pessimist. And it was one of the theories of Thomas Hardy that the universe is crazy. The universe does not have a moral compass. The universe does not have any sense of poetic justice, and things have been determined from before. So this kind of determinism was rampant in the Victorian era, and it has filtered down into the modern era by this cycle of influences. So somebody gets influenced by Philip Larkin and starts writing poetry. They will write poetry in this pessimistic vein. But I think this poem is far from being pessimistic. But from the feel of it, I think there is some pessimism in it, because if we have already determined, if our fates are already determined, then there is no point in trying to do anything. যা হবে তা দেখা যাবে, তারপরে যা হয় সেটা আর দেখা যায় না. If this goes on, then I don't know if there is any point in trying to do anything at all. Anyway, let's move forward. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old style hats and coats. Of course they were. As I said, our parents were equally fucked up by their parents, and then they in turn by their parents. So by fools in old style hats and coats. So people who were our parents' ancestors, they were fools. They wore these old style hats and coats, but they were not fools because they wore these kinds of obsolete dresses. They were fools because they were intelligent for their time. Let that sink in. Our grandparents did not want our mothers to mix freely with men, boys, because there was no contraceptive pills and there was no protection. They were intelligent. But when this intelligence and when this very practical reasoning gets handed down to the next generation, then it becomes a taboo. মেশাটা কেন বারণ ছিল সেটার একটা পয়েন্ট ছিল 50 বছর আগে, but that point is not valid anymore. Hence the 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 restrictions that the mothers place on their daughters, yes Shraman, I'll come to you, that the mothers place on their daughters seems to be illogical, because now there are options. They were intelligent, they were fools at their they were not fools at their time, they were intelligent for their time, but now they have turned into fools. Yes, Shraman.
I mean, actually একটাই জিনিস একটু ভেরিফাই করানোর ছিল যে though the societies are very much different, the British society or the Western society and our Eastern society, but in our society, in Manusmriti mainly, I mean the differentiation or the what should I say, the comparison was always there. The girls are just impure and they are there to satisfy men and all that. So can we say that the germ of this discrimination is in our history? It is coming from our history.
The word should be histories instead of history. Manusmriti is one of the many texts that exists in parallel with so many other texts. If you compare the earliest discovered texts, including Vedas, they valued women highly, pretty highly, though
Yes,
there was bias. Yes.
মানে ওটাই দেখছিলাম যে মানে ঋগ্বেদিক পিরিয়ড যখন চলছে, then women had the opportunity to choose to freedom, but ultimately এই ধর্মশাস্ত্র and মনুস্মৃতি যখন থেকে লেখা হচ্ছে, কোথাও না কোথাও গিয়ে মানে এটা একটা না একটা টাইম লাইন ধরে চলছে। মানে ঋগ্বেদিক পিরিয়ডের পরে যখন বৈদিক এই আই মিন কি বলে গৌতম বুদ্ধের যে গৌতম বুদ্ধের যে পিরিয়ডটা আসছে বা তারপরে যে পিরিয়ডস গুলো আসছে, কোথাও না কোথাও ফ্রিডমটা কেড়ে নেওয়াই হচ্ছে কোনো না কোনো ফর্মে। সেটাই এক্সট্রিমে গিয়ে দাঁড়াচ্ছে এই মানুস্মৃতির টাইমে।
Yes, you are quite right that this fucking up of the freedom of women, especially, though there are various layers to this fuck up, it, it has been over time, and the women, perhaps at a crucial point in time, had stayed quiet for whatever reasons, and thus the Brahminical hierarchy, the Brahminical society succeeded in not just marginalizing the women but also marginalizing the other uh, communities or so-called castes. I'm not saying that the writer or writers of Manusmriti were intelligent for their time. I mean, of course, fools exist in all ages. And among them, one fool becomes the king. And that fucks up the entire world. We can exhibit any political leader from our present democratic society, democratic setup, and we will understand that what fools could do to a perfectly well made and well maintained society, how they can destroy everything. But what my argument is that all of the parents were not fools. They are backdated, they appear to be backdated because they are backdated now. The problem of our society, Western, Eastern, whatever society, is because we have stopped evolving, we have stopped changing, we have stopped ourselves from adapting to what we have now. Rather than we are in a comfort zone that okay, there are these Manusmriti rules and there are these Vedic rules and there are these rules written by the Mughal emperors, and let's follow them blindly. I'm not saying that all of the parents, all of the people at that time were, all of them were intelligent. But some of them were intelligent according to their time and zeitgeist. There's a term called zeitgeist, which means the the flavor of the time, the the idea of that particular time. So okay, fine, we call them fools. I mean, our children will call us fools, not because we are not intelligent for our own time, but we will not be intelligent enough for their times. And if we try to inject our ideas, vague ideas, which become vague with time, then they will call us fools. So what we can do is we can try to evolve. You guys often maybe as a compliment, or I don't know, as a satire or sarcasm, many of you say that I am like you. I talk in your language. I try to be one of you. because I don't want to be called a fool, because I am ready to change, I am ready to adapt. I have seen something, I have seen people behave very differently towards their teachers when I was studying. We hardly looked into the eyes of our professors. Not because they were scary, not because they were like beating us up, not college professors at least, but because there was this sense of respect. And I understood that this respect is earned by them, not because they are professors, but because they are good human beings. And I can mix now as friends with them. They have accepted me as their friends. But back then, I couldn't imagine talking to them as I I like you guys talk to me. Even now, I guess, there is still a limit, and I want to test that limit with my students sometimes. My co-learners sometimes. Students is such a hierarchical word. So maybe I will not be a fool because I have tried to adjust. I have tried to adapt. And many people try to do that. In fact, there's a strange thing. I don't know if you will agree or not. While your parents are strict, while your parents are not very trusting of you, your grandparents give you that free leash. Ja Simran ja, jile apni zindagi, that kind of thing. But it were these grandparents against whom your parents have revolted. Your parents say that they were, fools, or they were strict. So what's going on here? Perhaps the grandparents have realized their mistake, but too late. They can't do it for their own children, but they can understand that the times have changed. But there are, not all grandparents are like that. Especially those grandparents who live with you all the time, they are still grumpy, like your parents. And in a kind of a curious experiment, I just thought about it, that if, say, suppose you have grandparents, like your grandfather and your grandmother, they live with you, and you have parents. You fall in love with a person from a different community, and you go and say that to your parent, that you want to marry a person from a different community, or a person from the same gender. That will be it. Your parents will be up in arms, perhaps. Not all of your parents, some maybe. And your grandparents might support you, might not support you. In some cases, they might. They would say that এত অশান্তি করার দরকার নেই, ও খুশি থাকলেই হলো, the kid, if the kid stays happy, then that's fine. However, if your parents, one of them, say that they have fallen in love with a person of a different community, or they have fallen in love with someone else than your parents, just imagine the pandemonium that will start in the house. It will burn. গাজা থেকেও খারাপ অবস্থা হয়ে যাবে. So why is that? Why is there this tension between the immediate parent and children thing? Perhaps because there is a sense of authority and its denial. Anyway, who half the time were soppy-stern and half at one another's throats. Soppy-stern, another colloquial word. So half of the time they were stern, they were strict, they were uh, they would not give you any reason as to why they are strict, but they are just strict because there is another construction that says that, you know, if you are not a strict parent, then you're not a good parent. just like uh, just like there's a construction in relationships that if you are not a jealous girlfriend or a boyfriend, then you are not a proper girlfriend or a boyfriend or a proper wife and husband. You need to be jealous of, jealously guard your prized possession. So there is no, half of the time they would be like soapy, they will be vague, they will be like, you know, dramatic, melodramatic, like a soap opera, and they will be stern, like the kinds of parents they see in the soap operas. Like আমাদের যে romantic notions গুলো আছে, the romantic notions that we have today in our society, not today, maybe 15 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, the kind of romantic environment, the kind of romantic ecosystem in which I grew was established by the movies of Shah Rukh Khan. শাহরুখ খান যেভাবে প্রেম করছে সেটাই হচ্ছে আইডিয়াল টাইপ অফ লাভ অর কার্টশিপ। আর তারপরে আসলো হচ্ছে ইমরান হাশমি। দ্য কাইন্ড অফ লাভ দ্যাট ইমরান হাশমি displays is the right kind of passionate love. I don't know what kind of love goes these days, but I'm sure that the OTTs, the movies, the games, the reels in the Facebook has a very deep role to play in it. And the soap operas, these things that we see, they influence us insidiously, unconsciously, and we follow them and we try to be like them. যাদেরকে রিলে দেখি, সে পেরেন্টস হোক, ডগ লাভার হোক, I don't know what else we watch. There's so many things to watch, and we try to become like them. The same thing was true with their parents and their parents also. Whatever they saw outside, they wanted to be like that. And half at one another's throats. বাবা মার ঝগড়া দেখতে মাঝে মধ্যে খুব এন্টারটেইনিং লাগে, বাট when it goes out of hand, it becomes not such a nice thing to see. আগেকার সময় ডিভোর্স হতো না, now divorce is a very common thing. One fight and you fear that, oh my god, these two guys are going to, you know, go their separate ways and I need to divide my time between these two old fools. So there will be a lot of implications, negative implications of a fight between two parents, and it's always bad for the child, it's always bad for the children if their parents fight. That destroys the peace of mind, there's a psychological implications and so on and so forth. But that is what their parents, that is what our parents have grown upon on. At least তোমাদের পেরেন্টসরা নিজেদের মধ্যে ঝগড়া করে কি করে না সেটা আলাদা ব্যাপার, কিন্তু তোমরা যদি জিজ্ঞেস করো যে তাদের পেরেন্টসদের তারা মারপিট করতে দেখেছে কিনা, ঝগড়াঝাটি করতে দেখেছে কিনা, চুলোচুলি করতে দেখেছে কিনা, তাহলে অনেকেই বলবে যে হ্যাঁ, they have seen this ugly thing happening between the parents. There are couples fighting even on their honeymoon, and when they have gone to some place they are not happy with each other and they always fight. So in the fight the one that gets damaged the most is usually the child. Anyway, man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. So, misery is a kind of a family treasure. है ना, फैमिली का गहना, माँ के कंगन, काइंड ऑफ बाबार घोड़ी, all these things, emotional stuff. So misery is also something that is handed down from generation to generation, and we love to get this thing from our parents. We take pride in the fact that, you know, my father was so short tempered that the entire community was scared of him. We like to do these things. Okay, just a minute, there is a call, just give me a minute. হ্যাঁ বলুন। হ্যাঁ বলছি। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, করে দেবো। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে। Okay, sorry for the interruption. So oh sorry. So the this misery, this pain, this sadness, this red flags, we carry these red flags down through generations. Our ancestors hand them down, we polish them, we make them more red, sometimes with others' blood, and then we carry them very uh, proudly. But it deepens like a coastal shelf. A coastal shelf gets eroded due to the action of the water, and it happens over thousands of years. So if you are a short tempered person, or if you are a person who is very impulsive, or if you are a person who lies very easily, very readily, if you are a liar, or if you are something, then all these things have something to do with all these hundreds of thousands of years of your lineage. Where do you come from? Get out as early as you can. So if you have like toxic parents, then you should get a job. That's why in America, in the Western countries, most of the Western countries, children are kicked out from their houses when they attain the age of 18. 18 বছর বয়স হয়ে গেলে বাচ্চাদেরকে বলা হয় তোমরা নিজেরটা নিজে দেখে নাও, and children are not allowed to stay with their parents anymore. But in our case, we live with our parents and we cannot live without them sometimes. So, but if you have toxic parents, if you have a problem with your parents, then get out as soon as you can, otherwise you'll go crazy if you are not already. And most importantly, the punchline is, don't have any kids yourself, because according to Larkin, who is a pessimist, we all are very toxic people. Let the toxicity stop with us. Let us not give another generation the same poison that we grew up with. So his sound advice is, don't have kids. So that's all with this poem. If you have any questions from this poem, you may ask me, and do remind me the kind of questions, suggestions that we are supposed to have from this poem or these two poems. Is it only critical appreciation, or is there something else?
না স্যার, দেখে বলছি, দাঁড়ান, ছিল কিছু কোয়েশ্চেন, দাঁড়ান। স্যার, লার্কিং থেকে হচ্ছে ক্রিটিক্যাল অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েশন ছিল, আর অ্যাজ আ মডার্ন পোয়েম ছিল।
Okay, so I guess we have covered both these categories. I mean, you already know what features of modern poetry is, and you just need to add the colloquiality, the plainness of the situation, the pessimism of the movement poetry, including Philip Larkin, and that would do. Okay, so let us move on to Deceptions by Philip Larkin.